Here is Communication in Families, Part 2. We're going to look at patterns of family communication. And before we get started, these 4 pictures are pictures of me and my two younger sisters and 2 younger brothers. This one, I think I was 12. I look like Woody Allen. There's my sister Kathy, my sister Pam, my brother Pete, my brother Al. Here we are when I was in college. We were all wearing different glasses. This person is me. Sometimes my students think that was me, but that's actually my brother Al. This was when my sister Pam got married. My one and only glamour shot. I can't believe I actually used to look like that. And then this is a picture of my siblings taken with my parents, maybe a little bit more than 5 years ago, I think. Okay, so let's take a look at the idea that families are families as communication systems. So family members are interdependent. If you remember you thought about your family as a mobile. If you touched one piece of that mobile, the whole mobile would swing around. So you cannot impact one member of the family without impacting everyone else. If there's been a divorce or a death in the family, that it messes stuff up. My father died almost exactly a year ago, and we're a different family now. A family is more than the sum of its parts. If you knew everybody in the family, you still would not understand the family unless you saw people interacting together. And then there's the idea that families have systems within larger systems. So if I just look at my family, my husband and my 2 children, so that's the family. But then there's my husband and I, and there's my son and I, my daughter and I, and my husband and my daughter, my husband and my son, and my 2 kids. So there are systems within larger systems. So let's look at, oh, come on. Okay, sorry, brief technical difficulties. We're okay now. One of the ways that you can look at how families as communication systems is to think about the degree that the family values communication. So that's called the conversation orientation. Does the family is it a family that talks about a large array of topics or not? So if it's a high conversation orientation, it means that family interacts freely, frequently, and spontaneously. If it's low, not a lot of interaction, less exchange of private thoughts. Conformity orientation looks at how much when the family's communicating, are they talking about it's important that we're all on the same page in terms of our attitudes, values, and beliefs? Are we following the norms of society? So a high conformity, where you're seeking interdependence and obedience, and a low conformity is where you're seeking individuality and equality. So I like this chart because it talks, I like this chart because there we go. It talks about different kinds of families. So we're going to do this. We're going to say a child in the family, a daughter at age 15 wants to get her septum pierced. Okay, and we're going to look at a family that has a low conversation orientation and high conformity. This one on the bottom left. It's called a protective family, where basically the parents say, we are not even going to discuss it. We are the parents. We make the decisions. You could have a family that's high in conformity and high in conversation, where the parents say, okay, well, let's talk about this. Why do you want to do this? What are the risks? What are the benefits? And then they say, ultimately, we are the parents. We will make the decision. Going over to the right, the pluralistic family, which is high in conversation and low in conformity, would say, okay, let's talk about this. How do you feel? I'd ask, we ask grandma, we ask the dog, everyone's involved. And then we say, ultimately, it's your nose, you make the decision. And then the laissez-faire family is, you do whatever you want. You don't even have to talk about it. So what I want you to do is think about in the family the family that you grew up in, what kind of a family was it? And I'm not talking about when you were 5, because when you were 5, your parents didn't say, let's discuss what time you want to go to bed. They said, I don't know, you're 5 o'clock, you're 5, you go to bed at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Okay. And then, we're not talking about now where maybe it's laissez-faire, you don't even talk about it. But I'm thinking about as an adolescent. So what should we say? Maybe 13 through 17 or so? Where do you think you were? And I will tell you, I grew up in a family that was more pluralistic. And my husband grew up in a family that was definitely protective. What the parents, you know, parents make the decisions and we don't even discuss it. And so we kind of settled on the consensual, or maybe I did. I'm not sure. He's in another room. I could say what I want, but we went more for the consensual. And I think neither of us was really comfortable doing that. So I want you also to think, what was the family that you grew up in? And if and when you have children and they are adolescents, what style are you going to use and why? Okay. So basically, to communicate effectively, no matter which of those 4 styles you have, if you remember the dialectical tensions of chapter, I think it was 8. Yeah, probably 8. It all, no, could have been last chapter. It all blurs now. One of the crucial dialectical tensions is the connection autonomy dialectic, which is how much do we do things together and how much are we independent. So this is really crucial when the child is becoming an adolescent. I remember going to, yep, I'm going blank. It's a historic, it was in the Battle of 1812, an important site. And, my daughter didn't want to be with us because it was so embarrassing to be seen with her parents, but she also didn't want to be too far away. So it's like, leave me alone, keep me close. You see this in 3-year-olds. What do they say? Pick me up, put me down, let me go, pick me up. Okay. To have successful communication in a family, you have to be flexible. And you have to realize that what worked today is not going to work tomorrow. And then it might not work the day after tomorrow, or it might. Another point, and this is, I don't know if we'll ever get there since my son's on the spectrum. I don't know if he's ever going to leave the house. But basically, for adult couples, once the children have left the family home, they have to renegotiate what it means to be a family. What does it mean to be a couple? That's really exciting to think that I might get there someday. Yeah, probably at that point they'll move out and we'll start raising grandchildren. Okay. Another point that goes with that connection autonomy is, how do families maintain closeness, but also make sure that they respect boundaries? So you could have a family that's enmeshed, where they do everything together. Nothing happens unless everyone agrees. There's consensus. Nobody can do things on their own. I hope I'm not saying anything negative about any of your families, but I think about these parents who, I saw this on the news once. There's a woman who was homeschooling her kids, and her son was 8, and she said, he's my best friend. And I thought, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't use the word normal, but I thought judgmentally, that's not normal. I think that's too much consensus and too little independence. Okay. You could go to the other extreme, which is disengaged, where it's like, yeah, do whatever you want. We don't really care. Oh, you weren't here last night? Didn't even notice. There's too little cohesion. Family's disconnected. Not a lot of attachment. So what's important to do is to make sure that there are certain boundaries. I learned, and I won't go into details, but I used to, when I'm bringing clean clothes, I would knock on my son's door and just go in. I don't do that anymore. I just knock on the door and wait for him to tell me it's okay to enter. Are there certain topics that we don't talk about? Do we have conversational boundaries? Uh, do we, let's see, what if it's a topic that somebody doesn't want to talk about but needs to be talked about? How do we handle it? And um, are any of you friends with your parents on, I don't know if you Facebook, but oh, I saw something really funny the other day, and I can't remember it exactly. Somebody posted something about a sexual encounter, and their mom chimed in and said, "Did you forget that we are, I can see what you post?" So that can be challenging for privacy management. What I forgot to say earlier was, or it doesn't really matter, if you, excuse me, look on page 307, there's a very short assessment that looks at your family's communication pattern. So if you weren't sure if you were protective or pluralistic or laissez-faire or the other one that I'm forgetting right now, autocratic, consensual, you can take the assessment on page 307 and it'll give you an idea of where you might be. And I wanted to see, is that the last page? Oh, no, one more. Oh, yes, two more. Again, you know more than I do. Since you're moving into adulthood, you're probably less concerned with social media, so you don't really care that you need to keep your parents off or put your parents on. I don't know. I know at one point I said to my son that I was thinking, I had created a Twitter account 15 years ago, 12 years ago, and I said I was going to start tweeting, and my son was like, "Mom, no!" I don't know what he thought I would be tweeting, but okay. And the last one is, it's really important, especially when you have young children, because when children are young, it's where you set a lot of, you set the foundation for who they will become. We're going to talk about this in chapter 12, yeah, or 11. We talk about different behaviors that are confirming. Yeah, it's Gibbs' work. So you want to have confirming behaviors. You want to tell your children that they are unique and they're valuable as human beings. And so one of the things I worked on, I had to work on it, was not to say to the kids, you are bad if you did something, or you're naughty, maybe if I didn't like the word bad, but what they did was not acceptable behavior. In fact, I think that was my line. This is not acceptable behavior. And don't do pseudo listening. When children are telling you something that's important, it's important to really listen to them. And one of the ways, one of my favorites, is to paraphrase or ask questions. So they'll tell me something and I'll say, "Oh, so you and Kelly had a fight and you're not friends anymore?" So that's a question. Paraphrase. Okay. Disconfirming behaviors would be if you belittle someone. "You're so stupid. Well, you're not as pretty as your cousin. You thought that you could play soccer? Boy, are you wrong." Or if you are making statements that lets children know that their ideas don't matter. And it's one thing to be a protective family where you say, "Look, we're the parents, and our what we say goes, and we don't need to discuss it." But you should never let the child think that their ideas don't count. This always baffles me, that people who really want to closely control their children when they're little, and then they send them off to college and expect that these students know how to make their own decisions. Anyways, that's a sidetrack. So this was communication in family. I'm going to take a break, and then we will do communicating in romantic relationships after this. So let me close this and